Hi everyone! For today's video, we're going to be talking about J.K. Rowling. If you guys haven't been living under a rock, you know that she's in some controversy lately over some things that she tweeted. I'm going to be talking about her original tweet as well as her Turf Wars essay that she wrote, as well as the new tweets that she just recently came out with. And the timestamps for when each of those discussions start will be in the description below. I know a few other trans YouTubers are talking about this. I know that Sam Collins did a video. I watched a few minutes of it, but then I decided that I wanted to look into it and come up with my own theories, I guess you could say, my own analysis. If you guys are new here and you like this video, make sure that you hit the subscribe button right down below, as well as give this video a big thumbs up. So with no further ado, let's get into it. So on December 19th, she tweeted in defense of Maya Forrester. Here's a screenshot of what Maya Forrester, I think I said Forrester. It's Forrester if you care. Women and girls lose out on privacy, safety, and fairness if males are allowed into changing rooms, dormitories, prisons, sports teams, etc. She's saying that if we allow transgender women into women and girls facilities, that we are undermining the safety of women and girls. In other words, transgender people are predators and cannot be trusted around women and children. It sounds to me like Maya's issue was mostly to do with men and women's spaces, and I think that's going to be a recurring theme throughout, J.K. Rowling's tweets. I think there's a huge problem with misogyny in this country, but I don't think that it's at the hands of transgender people. Okay, so that's what Maya had to say, and then J.K. Rowling in Maya's defense tweeted this. Dress however you please, call yourself whatever you like, sleep with any consenting adult who'll have you, live your best life in peace and security, but force women out of their jobs for stating that sex is real. Hashtag I stand with Maya, hashtag this is not a drill. Okay, this tweet is just riddled with sneak disses. This woman is just tweeting out sneak disses. Dress however you please. Being transgender is not how I dress. I could wear all boys clothing throughout the duration of my transition and still be a woman. Call yourself whatever you like. What do you mean call yourself whatever you like? Face value, you would look at that and just be like, okay, she's saying do whatever you want. She's saying dress how you want, call yourself whatever you want. But you have to read between the lines. She's saying that being transgender is just putting on a dress or, calling yourself a new name. And that's not at all what it is. The next line, sleep with any consenting adult who'll have you. Consenting adult, what do you mean? Is that really necessary to say? You think that transgender people are out here having sex with people that don't consent? Live your best life in peace and security, but force women out of their jobs for stating that sex is real. Nobody is saying that sex isn't real. I don't know any trans people that don't believe in biological sex. Biological sex is kind of the whole point. If I wasn't born biologically male, then I wouldn't have had to transition. I don't agree that sex is as binary as male and female. For instance, we have intersex people and people that have different sets of chromosomes, all that kind of stuff. People love to boil down sex to being your chromosomes or being your genitalia. Sex is a combination of many, many factors, including primary, secondary sex characteristics, chromosomes, hormones, and a bunch of other stuff. She's also clearly saying that she doesn't think that transgender people are women because she says, but force women out of their jobs for stating that sex is real. If she thought that trans people were women, she would say, but force people out of their jobs for saying that sex is real. But no, she had to make it about, oh, well, you're making us actual women have to lose our jobs just to play along with your little games. I support, but in reality, you're not real. That's literally what she's saying. As I'm sure you can imagine, she got a lot of backlash for that tweet, and she was silent for a little while, but then she came out with this essay called Turf Wars, which is just so funny to me. She really titled it Turf Wars. Anyways, I'm not going to go through every line. It's going to take way too long if I do that. I am going to read some of the lines that I think are important. Other paragraphs I'll just paraphrase for you guys. So the first line, this isn't an easy piece for me to write for reasons that will shortly become clear, but I know it is time to explain myself on an issue surrounded by toxicity. I write this without any desire to add to that toxicity. I call bullshit. We're going to move on. The next paragraph, she's just setting the scene. She talks about her tweets and what got her into the controversy. The next paragraph, she claims that she's cared about trans issues for years and that she started to learn about transgender people for a book that she was writing, but then it developed into something much more personal. I'll let you know now that she talks about 5 different reasons for why she felt the need to upload this Turf Wars essay. We're going to go through all of them. Just put your seatbelt on. She talks about how she accidentally liked a transphobic tweet to go back to it and look at it later, which whatever, girl. Whatever you want to say, it's fine, whatever. She continues on to defend the fact that she followed somebody named Magdalene Burns on Twitter. I want to read to you what she had to say about Magdalene. She said, I compounded my accidental like crime by following Magdalene Burns on Twitter. Magdalene was an immensely brave young feminist and lesbian who was dying of an aggressive brain tumor. I followed her because I wanted to contact her directly, which I succeeded in doing. However, as Magdalene was a great believer in the importance of biological sex and didn't believe lesbians should be called bigots for not dating trans women with penises, dots were joined in the heads of Twitter trans activists and the level of social media abuse increased. By the way, as a trans woman, I agree with all that kind of stuff. 1, biological sex is real, and 2, having a genital preference is very, very valid. If you don't want to date somebody with a penis, you have every right to not date somebody with a penis. Nobody is saying that you have to. Nobody. The point when people start saying it's transphobic is when you say that you don't want to date a transgender person just because of the fact that they're transgender. For example, for me, I've had bottom surgery, so that physical barrier that somebody might feel about dating somebody that is pre-op, it isn't really there anymore. So now when I hear guys say, oh, I don't want to date you because you're trans, or I'm uncomfortable dating you because you're trans, that's literally just because I'm trans. Like, they just don't want to date somebody that's trans. I find it especially funny when guys will tell me that they're attracted to me, and then they find out just the fact that I'm trans, and then they're no longer interested. They're like, oh, I'm not into that. I'm like, not into what? Just the label, just the name trans? Like, there's literally nothing different. Nothing changes at all. The reason that people got upset that Rowling followed Burns on Twitter was because that's not all that she talked about on her Twitter feed. She frequently explicitly stated that she did not believe that trans men were men or that trans women were women, as well as tweets similar to this one. You can read it. You can find out for yourself why that's kind of bad. Like, that's, I feel like I don't even have to explain that one. The next few paragraphs, she goes on to talk about how she expected the backlash and she was ready for that, but she wasn't expecting all the support that she received in her email. I'm just going to read it right from the thing so I don't mess it up. She said that they're also worried about the dangers to young people, gay people, and about the erosion of women's and girls' rights. Above all, they're worried about a climate of fear that serves nobody, least of all trans youth. I'm confused. I'm not sure what she's talking about when she said that we're trying to take away women and girls' rights. I think she's referring to, in that case, they wanted to have only assigned female at birth women in this certain place for this certain reason or treatment or whatever. The judge was like, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. You can do that. But like, that's not all you're doing. Like, that's not the reason that it's bad. That right is really not being infringed upon. The judge literally said that they have every right to do that. And like, also as a trans person, like, if you need a space that doesn't have any trans people in it, I think you're kind of weird. I don't know what we did to you, girl, but have fun. She then goes on to talk about TERFs and like defining TERFs and saying how like toxic TERF culture is, and like saying that people are afraid that they'll be canceled if they associate with her, blah, blah, blah. And then she goes on to say, so why am I talking about this? Am I speaking up? And she gives those 5 reasons that I was talking about. Firstly, I have a charitable trust that focuses on alleviating social deprivation in Scotland, with a particular emphasis on women and children. Beautiful. We love that. Among other things, my trust supports projects for female prisoners and for survivors of domestic and sexual abuse. Beautiful. We love that. I also fund medical research into MS, a disease that behaves very differently in men and women. Okay, cool. It's been clear to me for a while that the new trans activism is having, or is likely to have, if all demands are met, a significant impact on many of the causes I support, because it's pushing to erode the legal definition of sex and replace it with gender. The only reason that people are trying to erode the legal definition of sex is because it erases transgender people. I think that what she's saying is she's concerned that when trans people go to the doctor, they'll be mistreated. So for example, if I went to the doctor as a trans woman, I would tell them that I'm a woman, not a trans woman, and that they would treat me as a cis woman and treat me for, diseases that affect cis women. But that really just isn't the case. All of my health professionals know that I'm transgender. They know my extensive medical history, and they know exactly how to properly treat me. So if that's her concern, I think that she should focus on making sure that healthcare has the proper systems in place to effectively treat transgender people. The second reason is that I'm an ex-teacher and the founder of a children's charity, which gives me an interest in both education and safeguarding. Like many others, I have deep concerns about the effect the trans rights movement is having on both. I think what she's talking about here is the fact that children are transitioning at a younger age, and she feels like it's her job to safeguard them and make sure that they don't put themselves on a path that they're going to later regret. First of all, you are not an expert. You do not have the qualifications to safeguard these children from the proper medical treatment that they need. If you are really concerned about the safety of these children, you should focus on making sure that trans care is adequate for trans children. I'm a very strong believer in making sure that the process of getting on hormones and the process of transitioning is all very thorough. When I was going to transition and I wanted to get on hormones, I went to my gender therapist and I was like, I need you to put me on hormones now. Like, I need them now, I need them now, I need them now. And she was like, That's not how it works. You need to go through this 12-session process, and then I can diagnose you. I can make sure that you're mentally stable. I can make sure that you're physically stable and like well enough to be on this medication, and that is what is going to be best for you in the long run. If that is your concern, that people are transitioning that shouldn't be transitioning, you should focus on making sure that they're getting the proper care that they need, like I was given. The third reason is that as a much banned author, I'm interested in freedom of speech and have publicly defended it, even unto Donald Trump. That's your reason, is that you feel like you need to express your right to freedom of speech. Go for it, girl. Like, nobody cares. Really, nobody cares about your freedom of speech. Go for it. The fourth is where things start to get truly personal. I'm concerned about the huge explosion in young women wishing to transition, and also about the increasing numbers who seem to be detransitioning because they regret taking steps that have, in some cases, altered their bodies irrevocably and taken away their fertility. Some say they decided to transition after realizing they were same-sex attracted, and that transitioning was partly driven by homophobia in either society or in their families. Detransitioners, we all know some, we've all heard of some. They're out there. They're definitely out there. I think that that's definitely a valid concern. Like I just mentioned, I'm a huge advocate for making sure that you transition the right way. There's definitely places that will prescribe hormones, your first session, and I don't think that's the safest method. Look it up on YouTube. There are people that transition. There are people that get on hormones because they convince their therapist that they need them right away, and their therapist is like, okay, if you need them, here you go, and then they realize later on that it's not right. That is real. That is something that does happen. Because of trauma, because of whatever reasons that it's happening, it happens. But I don't think the solution to that would be to do what J.K. Rowling is doing. I think, again, the solution would be to make sure that trans care is as good as it can be. She goes on to talk about somebody named Lisa Littman, who apparently in some interview was talking about transgender people, blah, blah, blah. Her career took a similar hit to that suffered by Maya Forstater. Lisa Littman had dared challenge one of the central tenets of trans activism, which is that a person's gender identity is innate, like sexual orientation. Nobody, the activist insisted, could ever be persuaded into being trans. That's true. That's completely true. Like I just said, there are definitely people that transition when they're not supposed to transition. It is very possible to persuade someone to transition, but you cannot persuade somebody to be trans. Even if they transition, that doesn't make them trans. It just means that they were persuaded into doing something that they shouldn't have done. The next sentence really just got me mad because, like, why even include this? In an article explaining why he resigned from the Tavistock Center, blah, 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 psychiatrist Marcus Evans stated that claims that children will kill themselves if not permitted to transition do not align substantially with any robust data or studies in this area, nor do they align with cases I have encountered over decades as a psychotherapist. Oh my God. Well, this therapist said that his trans patients don't kill themselves, so you guys are wrong. I don't even know what to say to that. Like, are you serious? Suicidal ideation and actually committing suicide are two different things. That's all I'll say. That's all I'll say. And then she goes on to say, if I'd been born 30 years later, I too might have tried to transition. The allure of escaping womanhood would have been huge. I get what you're trying to say, but trust me, girl, there's no allure to being transgender. There's no allure to risk rejection from your family, from loved ones, from friends, from literally everybody. Risk being unemployed, risk being homeless, risk being murdered to escape womanhood. And then a few paragraphs later, she says, as I didn't have a realistic possibility of becoming a man back in the 1980s. Girl, what are you talking about? People transitioned in the 80s? What? And she's like, is this new fad that, if I had been around when this fad was crazy, I probably would have transitioned too. Like, people were transitioning back then. You could have transitioned if you were trans. You just aren't. She goes on to talk about how she's met trans people. She's met older trans people, younger trans people, blah, blah, blah. And then she says, the current explosion of trans activism is urging a removal of almost all the robust systems through which candidates for sex reassignment were once required to pass. Girl, I've had sex reassignment, and let me tell you, it's not easy to get there. And also, like I've said multiple times, I mean, I know that I don't speak for every trans person, but I think that most of us would agree that, transitioning is not something that can be taken lightly. You need to go through the proper process to be properly diagnosed, to make sure that this is what is truly right for you. It's the same as if you have a disease that needs treatment or something like that. You have to go to the doctor and get properly diagnosed, and then they'll give you the medications. You can't just go in and be like, oh, I broke my arm, I need pain pills. And they'll be like, oh, you broke it? Oh, okay, cool, bet. They'll be like, no, okay, let me take an x-ray, make sure it's actually broken, make sure that, wrap, I don't even know what they do, but That's just not how it works. Nobody's trying to get rid of that process. The next paragraph, she talks about how misogynistic our current climate is, which I agree with. Quote unquote, she says, from the leader of the free world's long history of sexual assault accusations and his proud boast of grabbing them by the pussy, talking about Trump and his misogynism, to the incel movement that rages against women who won't give them sex, talking about, sexist men online that are like, fuck women, let's rape them all, to the trans activists who declare that TERFs need punching and re-educating. Men across the political system seem to agree. Let me get this right. She blames 3 groups of men for the misogynism that is in the country right now. She blames the president, she blames incels online, and she blames trans activists, who she called men. She then goes on to talk about her emails and how people are emailing her saying that, it's not enough to be a trans ally. I have to admit that they're the same as me and I've been through all these struggles, blah, blah, blah. No trans woman is erasing the struggles of cis women. That's just not happening. It's really not happening. Secondly, trans women know that they're different from cisgender women. That's what makes us trans. We're not going around saying that we're cisgender because we're not. We're transgender. We were born physically male and then we transition to whatever we transition to. That's just how it works. We know that we're not cis women. We know there's a difference. We just want you to know that we're also women. There's this big umbrella of women. There's trans women, there's cis women. We're both just women. That's all we want you to know. We're different kinds of women for sure, but we're both women. Thank you. Or finally, to the last reason that she gives us for why she's making all this commotion. I've been in the public eye for over 20 years and I've never publicly talked about being a domestic abuse and sexual assault survivor. This isn't because I'm ashamed of those things, but because they're traumatic to revisit, blah, blah, blah. She says I'm not doing this to gain sympathy, but she wants to stand in solidarity with women who have histories like hers, and she doesn't want to be called a bigot for not wanting trans people in same-sex only spaces. She goes on to say that if you can come inside my head and understand what I feel when I see a trans woman killed, you'll know that I have sympathy, blah, blah, blah. She says, so I want trans women to feel safe, but at the same time, I do not want to make natal girls and women less safe. When you throw open the doors of bathrooms and changing rooms to any man who believes or feels he's a woman, and as I've said, gender confirmation certificates may now be granted without any need for surgery or hormones, then you open the door to any and all men who wish to come inside. That is the simple truth. I'm getting so heated right now. Oh my God. She starts out strong. I want trans women to feel safe. Thanks. We appreciate that so much. And then she goes on to say, when you open the doors of bathrooms and changing rooms to men, who's the men? Who are the men? Who opened it to the men? Nobody did. I think they just opened it to trans women. Is that what they said? I think that's what the law was, no? Because if you're worried about men pretending to be women and going in women's restrooms to, assault you, that's already very much illegal. The part that really grinded my gears though, gender confirmation certificates may now be granted without any need for surgery or hormones. I thought I'm sorry, am I wrong? This whole time she's been arguing about how women have been forced to feel like they're not girls because they don't want to align with the, typical femininity, the normative femininity. But then she's also saying that if transgender women don't conform to that femininity, that they're not valid trans women. She's saying that if you don't alter your physical body to conform to what her idea of a woman is, then you're not a woman. You've been arguing about the dangers of fitting women into small little boxes. It just doesn't add up. She continues on with all this stuff saying like, well, all a man needs to do to say he's a woman is just say he's a woman. Why would a man say that he's a woman? It just don't make no sense. Like if a man's just trying to lie and go into a bathroom to assault you, that's already illegal. Like I already said 25 times, that's illegal. The rest of the essay, she's like, I don't want sympathy, blah, blah, blah. I'm doing this to protect my free speech and all this stuff and all those reasons. It doesn't matter. It literally just doesn't matter. This whole essay to me is just very, very manipulative. She's trying to paint this narrative of trans women being men underneath it all, and that trans women are inherently dangerous because of, what they have or had between their legs. She seems to be using her experience with sexual assault to defend her position on trans rights, but it's kind of missing the mark in my opinion. We all agree that sexual assault is bad, don't get me wrong, and that's obviously tragic that it happened to you, but you cannot blame trans women for the problems that a man brought onto you. She talks about in this essay how she thinks that some people do legitimately need to transition and that is what's going to be best for them, but then she continuously refers to us as men. Anyways, let's move on to the tweets that she came out. Sorry, can you hear my nails clicking? Let's move on to the tweets that she tweeted out pretty recently, actually, still going on about this. Like, I don't understand why you're still going. So her first tweet from June 28th says, "Today I discovered I was accused of hate by Shadow Environment Minister Lloyd Russell Moyle in the pages of the Tribune magazine. His claim was I was using my experience of sexual assault and domestic violence to discriminate against transgender people." Next tweet, "This morning, Mr. Russell Moyle issued an apology on Twitter, although he didn't trouble to tag me. Coincidentally, his change of heart occurred after his remarks were repeated in national newspapers with higher circulations than the Tribune magazine." For those who would like to know what triggered the Shadow Minister's original accusation, these are the relevant paragraphs of the essay I wrote a couple weeks ago. I talked about the paragraphs that she mentioned, but I will just briefly kind of like go over them again just so you know exactly what she's talking about. The paragraphs read, "I believe the majority of trans-identified people not only pose zero threat to others," cute, "but are vulnerable for the reasons I've outlined. Trans people need and deserve protection. Like women, they're most likely to be killed by sexual partners. Trans women who work in the sex industry, particularly trans women of color, are at particular risk." Just zip it right there. Perfect. That's a great paragraph. We love that. Okay. The next one is the one that I talked about a little bit before. "So I want trans women to be safe. At the same time, I do not want to make natal girls and women feel less safe. When you throw open the doors of bathrooms and changing rooms to any man who believes or feels he's a woman, and as I've said, gender confirmation certificates may now be granted without any need for surgery, without any need for surgery or hormones, then you open the door to any and all men who wish to come inside. That is the simple truth." No. She says it herself, "to any man who believes or feels he's a woman." If a man believes or feels that they are a woman, I believe that makes them a trans woman, does it not? Why are you referring to them as men? I'm just confused. I'm not confused, actually. I know exactly what she's doing. So honestly, I agree with whatever that guy's name was. I think that she's definitely bringing up the fact that she was assaulted. She's trying to garner sympathy for that. She's like, well, I was assaulted. I need you guys to know that I've been through this experience and it makes me personally uncomfortable because I have been through blah, blah, blah. Trust me, girl, I don't want to pee next to you any more than you want to pee next to me. She then says, "Since writing my essay, I've received over 3,000 emails thanking me for speaking up. I've been brought to tears many times while reading, sometimes out of gratitude for their kindness, but also because many women have shared their own experiences of violence and sexual assault. Some emails came from professionals working in women's refuges, the prison service, the social work system, the criminal justice system, and the police. All expressed concerns about the aims and methods of current trans activism." She is saying that people are afraid that trans women will be put into women's spaces in the criminal justice system, in the prison system, in the social work system, women refuges. They're afraid that trans people will infiltrate those spaces. Would you rather us just die? Like, would you rather trans women die? If you don't want trans women in women refuges and you want us to go to men refuges. I don't know if I'm saying that word right. That'd be really embarrassing. You want us to go to prison with other men. Or you want us to go to, a male-only foster house or something like that. That's just not realistic. And that puts trans people in danger. There are multiple stories out there of trans women being kicked out of these women refuges or women-only homeless shelters and they just die on the streets. Is that what you want? As I stated in my essay, my primary worry is the risks to vulnerable women. As everyone knows, I'm no longer reliant on communal facilities, nor am I likely to be in prison or need a women's refuge at any time soon. I'm not arguing for the privileged, but the powerless. Show me literally one specific case where a trans woman has caused harm in a women's refuge in any of these places. Can I see? Because other than that, it just seems like you're fear-mongering. And then in a different thread, she goes, "I've ignored fake tweets attributed to me and retweeted widely. I've ignored porn tweeted at children on a thread about their art. I've ignored death and rape threats. I'm not going to ignore this." She says, "When you lie about what I believe about mental health medication and when you misrepresent the views of a trans woman for whom I feel nothing but admiration and solidarity, you cross a line. I've written and spoken about my own mental health challenges, which include OCD, depression, and anxiety. I did so recently in my essay, Turf Wars. I've taken antidepressants in the past and they helped me. Many health professionals are concerned that young people struggling with their mental health are being shunted towards hormones and surgery when this may not be in their best interest. If people are being pushed towards hormones and surgeries without being properly diagnosed with gender dysphoria and actually being transgender, that is not good. That is not the adequate trans care that I stand for." She says, "Many, myself included, believe we are watching a new kind of conversion therapy for young gay people who are being set on a lifelong path of medicalization that may result in the loss of their fertility and or full sexual function." It's interesting that you know that these people are gay and not transgender, and that this is conversion therapy for them, when in reality you don't know these people at all. She says these concerns were explored by the recent BBC documentary about the Tavistock Clinic. Whistleblowers were talking about transitions driven by homophobia. She says, as I've said many times, transition may be the answer for some, for others it won't. Witness the accounts of detransitioners. The system sees surgery as an easy fix to girls who do not conform. Speaking from my own personal experience, I was deeply assessed to make sure that I had gender dysphoria that was consistent, persistent, and resistant. And my gender therapist would not prescribe me hormones or even give me a referral to an endocrinologist without being fully convinced that I was truly experiencing gender dysphoria in those 3 different ways. So I actually watched the video that she linked, and it highlights a lot of concerns that doctors were having in the Tavistock Clinic. Basically, there were concerns over doctors referring individuals too soon for hormone treatment. There were concerns over parents pushing their children to transition. There were concerns that the medical professionals were hurting children. Okay. The clinicians there were also worried that children who were traumatized were processing their gender identity differently. They talk about how there was one person specifically that was discouraging people from reporting the trauma that people had gone through and discouraging people from seeking additional advice from the person that was trained to deal with people who had been through trauma like that. As somebody that's been through hormone replacement therapy, as well as sexual reassignment surgery, top surgery, all that kind of stuff, I would definitely not want somebody that is not transgender to be put through these treatments or these procedures. But I really don't think that this issue derives from trans activists. I feel like this is really just kind of an outlier case where this one person was throwing the whole process off. This is not the norm in all gender clinics. You can see that even in the video. They talk about how over 40 different clinicians ended up leaving because of this one specific person. They talked about how the people there didn't agree with what she was doing, and they didn't agree with the type of treatment that they were giving these children. And then to even build further on top of that, when they did go past this one individual person and bring it to the superior who was properly trained to deal with the traumatized individual, they were supported from this person, and that person got the help that they needed. It seems to me like she's using this case to kind of push her narrative that gender clinics are dangerous and that they're places that cis women are going to go to and, be forced to transition into men, when that's really just not happening. She goes, Sophie is a trans woman and a true feminist ally. A feminist ally? You couldn't just say feminist? No, you couldn't just say feminist because you think that feminists can only be women and you don't think that trans women are... Okay, got it. Thank you. She was making the point that antidepressants were overprescribed to teenagers in the past with serious consequences. Okay, I don't see how that has to do with the whole, gender clinic argument, but go off. The next tweet in the thread is a link, and it reads, the long-term health risks of cross-sex hormones have now been tracked over a lengthy period. These side effects are often minimized or denied by trans activists. No, they're not. There's cardiovascular risks to going on hormone replacement therapy, and that's very clearly outlined when you go to get hormones by your endocrinologist, or at least it should be. People are getting the medication that they need, and that medication comes with side effects that we are informed of, just like a lot of other medications that people take. She says Carl Hennigan, professor of evidence-based medicine at Oxford University, has described the off-label use of puberty blockers on under 18s as an unregulated live experiment on children. I feel like people get really scared when they hear hormone replacement therapy in relation to children. No 8-year-old, no 9-year-old is going on hormone replacement therapy. When you hear about children transitioning, it is just the social aspect of transitioning. Hormones are not introduced until the body starts going through puberty, and even then, it's usually only puberty blockers that are given at that point. It's not cross-sex hormones. It's just something that will temporarily offset the start of that person's natural puberty. So if they decide later on that they aren't transgender and they want to continue with the puberty that, their body would have went through, they can stop hormone blockers and their body will continue to progress in the way that it would have before. But if they decided they are transgender and they want to continue to transition, their body now has not gone through those physical changes aligned with their birth sex, that would be a lot harder to reverse or treat the dysphoria for. The last tweet in this thread says, none of that may trouble you or disturb your belief in your own righteousness. But if so, I can't pretend I care much about your bad opinion of me. Anyways, we're going to be done with that. In conclusion, trans people are not denying that biological sex is real. Number 2, women and girls need protections. That is very, very right, but so do trans women, and so do trans men, and so do non-binary people. We all need protections, sis. It's not just you, okay? Okay, guys, I think that is going to be it for this week's video. I hope that you guys enjoyed this little commentary type video. If you did, please make sure to let me know down below. Other than that, if you guys like this video, please make sure to give it a big thumbs up down below. Subscribe if you are not already and you would like to be. Comment, like I said, share, notification bell, I don't know. I love you guys so, so, so much, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.